I have really two roles in our presentation this afternoon. I'm going to be the talk show host, and this is our talk show stage here, and I'm going to interview Nick and Nadia. But before I do that, I'm going to try and put our presentation in a little bit of context. I was asked to do that. And, you know, remember that song, You're So Vain, I'll bet you think this song is about you? Well, I have been studying you, observing you, watching you, for about a quarter century now. It's about 25 years since I started research on emergency food and emergency food providers in the United States. And so, by way of putting this in context, I wanted to talk about why I think this is such a crucial moment in the history of trying to get food to hungry people in the United States, and in fact, trying to bring about an end to hunger and poverty. Well, it would help if I had the right page. Hold on a second. So when I say I think we're at a kind of crossroads, there's been a lot of ferment in the food banking world, in the emergency food movement. A lot of people are trying to provide better food. A lot of organizations are trying to make sure they're including healthy food. More organizations have some engagement with public policy. But now I think is the time when we have to decide whether we're going to settle for that, for a little better food in the warehouse and a few more wraparound ancillary services to help clients get on their feet, and a bit of nutrition education and a little bit of policy advocacy, or whether we are going to waken the sleeping dragon. If you add together all of the clients and members and patrons, we've been talking in the Race and Privilege workshop about the language we use, and I'm finding myself using old language even right here. But if we were to tap the potential power of all of the members of our community, our volunteers, our board members, our staff, our donors, our broader membership, we're enormous. We are a huge part of the population of this country. And I think we are a part of the population that is tired of the injustices that are dominating the lives of people in our communities. So that's what I mean by a crossroads. I think we are in a kind of moment of danger. I went on the farm worker tour. And those of you who were with me on that tour on Monday, I think, would agree that this was a powerful experience. But one of the things I left with was understanding that the West Coast drought has a profound effect on the lives of a whole segment of our community that's dependent on a thriving agriculture. We had a situation, from, if I understood it, that as fields dried up in California, farm workers moved north to look for work in Oregon and Washington, thereby driving wages down here because there was a flood of labor supply. I also learned from that tour more than I had known about the power of the anti-immigrant sentiment that has been so unleashed by, I don't really want to call it political leadership, but political contenders in our nation, and the deep impact this has on the lives of our citizens. I don't need to remind this audience about the importance of racism and state-sanctioned violence. Anyone who's lived through the last year has to have this on your agenda. Joanne Lowe called it state-sanctioned violence, but I really want to call it state-sponsored violence, particularly against people of color. We are losing farmland in our country. Did you know that the average for the last 25 years, an acre a minute? We have been losing farmland at the rate of an acre a minute. I think of Catherine Strickland's mentioning the member of their staff who had lost a farm that had been in the family for 100 years, for generations. The farmland loss is not only scenic deprivation for those of us who like to drive through the countryside and see beautiful farms, and it's not only the loss of the potential to feed ourselves with that farmland, but it's also the loss of the livelihoods and connections and communities for people who've been deeply invested. When I think about the loss of farmland as the potential for feeding ourselves, I think about the enormous change in agriculture over the 20th century, which really can be seen as the migration of agriculture away from rainfall towards sun. And it looks like it may have to come back. So we have lost so many farms in the Northeast that are highly productive land that are now shopping malls and parking lots and IMAX theaters and subdivisions. So this is a time when we're confronted with enormous challenges. I want to add violence against women to my list of things that are part of the context of needing to find a better way to meet human needs in our society. And I want to mention it in a global context, because I think we've probably all been shocked and distressed and despairing about the way in which women are being treated around the world. And then I want to move on to inequality as, for me, the core. This has been, for those of you who did read Sweet Charity, you can attest to the fact that I was talking about inequality 20 years ago. Thank you very much. The levels are incredible. In 1976, the top 1% were getting 8.9% of the total income in the United States, so 9 times what they would have been getting if we'd had equality. By 1994, which is about when I began my engagement with emergency food and food banking, it was up to 14.23, but now it's 22.46, okay? The top 1% is getting almost a quarter of the total income. And as you know, wealth inequality is much more exaggerated and profound than income inequality. And wealth inequality, the net worth of the Forbes 400, okay, back in 1995 when I was first looking at emergency food, it was 507 billion. Now it's 2 trillion. It was 2 trillion in 2012. The top 3% of households have 55% of the wealth. That's twice as much as the bottom 90%. Okay, the bottom 90% of our population controls 25% of the wealth. The top 3%, 55, more than twice that much. And because of this inequality and an increasing drift in our political structure to letting money control politics, power is now concentrated in very few hands. Citizens United upped the ante, but Citizens United, this has been going on for a long time. If there's more time later, maybe we can talk a little bit more about this, but I never occupy a platform without saying, regardless of what issues we work on, we have to also work on campaign finance reform and limiting money income. So, despite all of our hard work for such a long time, we have not eliminated hunger. The hunger numbers are down slightly from last year. That's the first time in a while that there's been any significant decline in the one of those national measurements. But I don't have to tell you that the recession is not over for people at the bottom. It's a little nervous-making that some pundits are predicting that we're on the edge of a new recession, because the people that we work with and care most about, our colleagues and friends, have never recovered from the previous recession. So it's a tough time to be asking about the future of our movement. But at the same time, there are real signs of hope, real reasons to move forward. I think Catherine Strickland used the term sobering but promising, and I thought that was a way to capture this. And I'm just going to quickly identify some of the reasons for hope. One is the food movement. It definitely was not around 25 years ago when I first started looking at you. And it gives us new potential allies. Sometimes I think it distracts us. I was mentioning to folks in one group, I joined a CSA this summer, and based on my experience, I would report that I'm not going to be putting a lot of energy and effort into trying to get poor people to join CSAs, because if I couldn't manage all those vegetables with the leisure that I now have as a partially retired people, I don't see how anybody with 2 kids and 3 jobs, or 3 kids and 2 jobs, could be doing that. Now, I don't mean to pick a fight with CSA folks now, but I do think we have to be careful that we don't get seduced by the fads in the food movement. I think that the national concern about obesity, although obesity itself and the rates of diabetes are a terrible problem, I think that for our movement, this growing awareness of the connection between diet and health is an asset that we can build on to engage more people and to draw down more resources. I think the behavior of USDA, it was great having Max Finberg yesterday, yes. This is not like the USDA of 10 years ago or the USDA of 20 years ago. USDA is much more on our side for the time being. We have to see what the outcome of future, but that creates access to resources and cooperation at important federal levels. For me, one of the biggest signs of hope is that we are finally having an overt conversation about inequality. I no longer have to explain to people what I mean or why it should matter to people who are not at the bottom. I think this is a huge change in our politics, and I'm looking forward to the impending presidential campaign to create more forums to explore this. And then finally, there's you, okay? There's the stories that I've heard, the presentations that you've made, the work that you're doing. I was very moved by Melissa Munt's account of kind of the staff rising up in the Tucson Food Bank to shift the priorities of the organization. I went to the workshop from the Alameda County Food Bank and its allies this morning about a vivid campaign to raise the state SSI benefit. You are doing so many kinds of good work, and you are learning from each other. I myself was not just moved, but kind of shaken up by the Race and Privilege workshop. And I think the fact that so many people are willing to begin to engage in the kind of change that we need to undergo to work effectively in such a diverse society, and in a society where there has been so much race-based oppression over the years, is a sign of hope and a readiness to move forward. So I think we are at a crucial juncture, and at that juncture, I'm delighted to be able to share this podium with Nick Saul and Nadia Edwards, because I think the story of the stop, and just in case you didn't, this is the book that you ought to read if you haven't yet had a chance. And both Nick and Nadia are in it in important ways. Nick as the co-author, and Nadia as one of the characters in the book, in a sense. But it's wonderful to have a chance to present this model of transformation of an organization from, not only did it start out as a kind of a food pantry, but wasn't a food pantry in very good shape, a kind of neglected and abused food pantry, to what became the model for Food Centers Canada. So this is the story of transformation that we want to capture, and we're delighted to be here to share it with you.